This is your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask with your host, Dr. Judith Briles. On the show today, you'll find out where book publishing is going and how to take advantage of it. How to identify and avoid publishing predators. What opportunities are emerging as the book trade evolves in new forms. How to avoid losing money and much, much more. Join us now as a variety of publishing pros will deliver insights and strategies to take the author to the next level of publishing. It's your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. Brought to you by AuthorU and the Book Shepherd. And now, here's your host, Dr. Judith Briles.
Well, welcome to another edition of AuthorU, your guide to book publishing. And today we have fun. This is a fun day. One of my favorite authors, really, for who can spark, ignite, create a buzz for creativity, is with us. We've never had the pleasure of him being with us before, but he is today. Justin Matott is an author of, I want to say really literally a gazillion books, because that's what he has written. In that process, he is a kid's delight, if you could imagine that. And that Justin has, I'm going to have him reel off a boatload of his books. So you know what some of them are, and we're going to go through them. But he's someone that has, over the past 12 years, has developed quite a platform for writing. And that speaking, he's inside of schools. Literally, the entire school will shut down, including administration, if justice is on the campus. His speaking is focused for the enjoyment of reading, storytelling, and motivating the most from reluctant readers to pick up a book and now get lost in them. In other words, when they open them, they fall in. He's also on an anti-bullying crusade, so he'll talk about that a little bit, as he moves from school to school and assemblies within their classrooms. So, Justin, welcome to AuthorU.
Thank you. It's great to be here with you, Judith.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite book of all your books?
Oh, man. You know, you get that question at every school you go to. Every one of them is like your kids. You can't pick a favorite. You like them all for different reasons, and you dislike them all for different reasons. For my picture books, I'd have to say that Old Lady Griselda has been what propelled me into national and a little bit of international fame, if you will. It's a story that I wrote about a woman that it was in the neighborhood I grew up in. I grew up in a country neighborhood, and there was this spooky lady that lived up on the hill. You know, every neighborhood has one of those, and right. My mom always said, if your neighborhood doesn't have one of those, you're that person. But I was really in favor, and my dad challenged me to go meet her. And when I went up there, she offered me favorite cookies that she had preordained with some mother. And then I just kind of fell in love with the lady. She was kooky and just wonderfully eccentric. And so her name was Katie Stroh. But when I was telling my sons bedtime stories, I would always tell them stories about her, and they'd always want another one and make it creepier and make her weirder. And finally I realized this is striking a chord with my own kids. It might strike a chord with other kids. So I wrote Old Lady Griselda and partnered with just an amazing designer, illustrator named John Woods Jr., and he just brought her to life. And so that was published in 1998, and it's still selling really well on all platforms. So she may be my favorite just because she kind of put the legs under me to be able to write for children.
Maybe gave you the courage that you could, too. I mean, you had that connecting factor, right? Well, I have to tell you, one of my favorites was your When I Was a Boy, and the When I Was a Girl. I loved those books. I remember buying them for my grandkids. All my grandkids got all your books as we went along in the process.
Well, the When I Was a Boy, I dreamed. When I was a girl, I dreamed. They were illustrated by Mark Ludy, he has a very big following. He's a very, very talented man. And he and I we were sitting in a bookshop up in Boulder, and we were at an evening event, and we were sitting next to each other, didn't know each other. And when he would engage a young kid. And they were telling him about them, like if they, like soccer and they had a dog, he would basically tell them, ask what kind of dog, and then they tell him and he'd draw the dog. And he's one of those people that's just spontaneously able to create. And while he was doing that, I was over there writing poetry. I was writing like 4 to 8 line poems about what he was doing. And he noticed that, and he leaned over and he said, what are you doing over there? I said, well, I'm listening to you and I'm drawing I'm writing what you're drawing. And then we kind of gathered a crowd. People were coming around and watching the two of us. And they said, why are you guys not doing books together? And he looked at me and goes, why aren't we doing books together? And I said, well, I think we are now. So we met the next week and started When I Was a Boy I Dreamed. And that book came out and it got super popular. I think the last he told me it was over 250,000 in print. And so, of course, the world kind of demanded, what about When I Was a Girl I Dreamed? And so we started working on that, and I just started asking girls and teachers and my wife and women in my life questions about what they dreamt about as a child. And then that book came out, and that book's like twice more popular than the boy book because grandmas are the ones that bust. So.
Well, if you have, let's see, that's the book with the treehouse in it, isn't it? That you've got the tree. Yeah. I loved the imagination, the creativity that, I don't know if it was all the illustrator or if you had your hands in that as that was developed, but I just think it's an amazing illustration. For all you listeners, just go buy these books so you can see them. And what happens. So let's just jump into the creative process. So how do you met this guy at a coffee shop kind of thing.
Right.
Where does this creative process really start? How do you work with other designers and editors and illustrators? I mean, you have more than one that you work with. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've worked with 7 different illustrators. For being my older son, he illustrated 2 of my books, and we designed them together. And they were books that we designed for children with dyslexia and perceptual difficulties. And they're all told from the viewpoint of a dog, which is very popular. And so he started doing the first book when he was in elementary school. And now he's got 3 kids of his own. And I'm working on the 3rd book, and hopefully he can illustrate that as well. But so my process basically is I get an idea, and I generally get an idea when I'm either skiing or running or doing something active. I've actually had complete books download into my head while I'm out running. And it's a magical time to create. And then, of course, you have to figure out how do I get that from my brain to the paper. And I've made the mistake early on of not ever having something to record it. And then when I got home, I just couldn't remember why I thought it was so magical. So now I always go equipped. I've got a little pocket notebook and pencil or my phone. I just dictate. And then let that idea just kind of percolate and then step away from it for a couple days and then come back to it. And if it still seems to have the merit that it did when I came up with it spontaneously, then I write it. I think it's just... hazard that going to do the editing and rewriting. And I always tell kids in schools, if you want to be a published author, you're going to have to write that book 50 times more than likely until you finally, get magic in your craft, and then you'll get down to 20. And I finally am down to about 25 drafts before I ever submit it to my agent or an illustrator, an editor, or anyone.
Well, that's what I think all authors actually need to hear is that my experience is so many think, okay, I've done it, it's ready to go to layout, and they don't understand the continual fine tuning, the continual rewriting, the continual tweaking. And I'm not so much talking about where your drive for perfection is going to turn into a full-blown procrastination thing. I'm just saying I have never seen anything come out perfecto the first time it's done, and I suspect you haven't either.
No. not even close. And I was very fortunate. I was adopted and raised by two English professors, and my dad was a PhD, kind of an egghead guy, super smart. He wrote about 5 novels and never got published. And he always said, every agent I talk to tells me my books are, they're too profound for the common reader, and they're too common for the profound reader. But I've read his work, and he was very, very good. But he was such a great teacher to me. When I got out of college, I got those old things called, and it had like a thermal roll print, and so I got that for graduating from college from someone, and I decided within a year, I'm going to write my first novel. And so the practice of that was you have to write something every day, and so my goal was always 3 to 5 pages a day, and so I wrote this book, and it was, very sophomoric. And I was living down in Austin, Texas, and my dad was up in Fort Collins, where I grew up. And so I was so excited to send my dad the manuscript, so I printed it all off, and I sent it to him. And, I was expecting just amazing things like, I'm the next John Grisham or something. And I didn't hear from my dad. And so like 2 or 3 weeks passed by, and I thought, well, he's super busy. I think it was during finals, and so he was grading papers. And so I waited, and about a month later, I was like, okay, I can't wait any longer. So I called him, and I said, hey, Dad, did you get a chance to read my manuscript? And there was a really long pause, and he said, I got a chance to read the first 10 pages I could go on. And I said, Dad, it's 373 pages. What do you mean you couldn't go on? He goes, Justin, this is not how you tell stories. This is not great. And I said, well, what do you mean? And my main character's name is Ryan. And he said, what did Ryan have for lunch today? And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, what did Ryan eat for lunch today is my question. And I said, well,
okay, so
Ryan doesn't eat. He's not real. He says, that's exactly the problem with Ryan.
All right, let's hold that. We'll be right back with this is Justin Matott.
This is your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. With your host, Dr. Judith Briles. And we'll be right back with more great information right after these.
Is there a book in you? Or another? AuthorU shows you how to create, develop, and publish your book without being hoodwinked. If you already have a book out, you will find a supportive and brainstorming community that is connected and creative, no matter where you live. AuthorU brings in national experts for its book camps and annual AuthorU extravaganza. It has regular meetings and delivers webinars for its members on timely topics. Through AuthorU's extensive network, members enjoy exclusive benefits, including significant discounts for a variety of services necessary to publishing. AuthorU is the premier authoring resource in the country, creating community, education, guidance, vision, and success for the serious author. If you want to create a book that has pizzazz, punch, and panache, AuthorU is for you. Timely author and publishing tips and articles are posted on its social media platforms, and it is free. Discover AuthorU, where authors go to become seriously successful. Join AuthorU today at AuthorU.org.
Welcome back to your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. If you want to write and publish a book, if you want to be successful as an author, your guide to book publishing, everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask, is for you. Stay tuned and you'll hear about statistics, scenarios, and strategies on what to do now to get you published. So let's get back to the show. And here again is your host, Dr. Judith Briles.
With me is Justin Matott today, and he is a beloved children's author. He has written literally a gazillion books, and we'll get into some of these, whether we're talking about aliens or dogs being nerds, or we're going to get into his Gabe series. And Justin, you have to tell us about the boo-boo that happened where some pages were missing and how you fixed it as the author. I'll never forget that story when you told me that. But let's go back to Dad and what Ryan ate and what was missing. Because this is real. I know where you're going. I think maybe our listeners maybe, but it's really important to understand what happened here.
Yeah, so he asked me, so what did Ryan have for lunch today? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, I asked you a question. What did Ryan have for lunch? And I said, Dad, Ryan's not real. He doesn't eat. He says, and that's the problem with Ryan. If you don't believe in Ryan, I can't believe in Ryan. And as a reader, he doesn't make any sense to me at all. You need to go back and write that from your heart and your head and let your characters become three-dimensional and real as though they're people you know. And I said, so Dad, if I just fix Ryan, is that going to be, I mean, if I make you believe in Ryan, then the book's okay? He says, no, you need to do a complete rewrite on that entire book because I've heard you tell stories. You need to write the way you tell stories. So if you need to dictate it into a recorder, then do it that way. Not everybody has to use a pen and pencil or a computer, you know, and so I thought, well, that's an interesting way to think about it. So I got one of those little mini recorders and I started doing chapter by chapter. And I bought my dad one of the same recorders so I could just send him the recorder and the tapes. And I sent it up to him. I sent him like 3 chapters that I had redone. And he called me in 2 days and he said, Justin, this is your book. This is wonderful. This is how you tell stories. But you always need to tell stories the way you tell them to an audience. And I thought, so now sometimes, because I have an office in my home, sometimes if you were to like eavesdrop on me, I'd be telling one of my stories to my dog Butters, and she would be really enjoying it, but you'd be thinking I was because I was telling a dog a story. But just, you know, whatever it is that gets somebody to bring their authentic voice out. And you know, and I had some coaching from my first agent. He was just a brilliant man from Belgium, and he'd been with Random House as a senior editor for many years, and then broke off into agency. And I sent him 3 novels for adults that I had written, and I made the mistake, and I really hope people hear this. I made the mistake of in my cover letter saying, "What you're holding in your hands is potentially the next John Grisham," and you know, the world doesn't need another John Grisham. And so I'm writing these thriller books with no experience in thriller stuff, and sent me very, very nice rejection letters. He sent me 3 rejection letters, and the third one was just on point. He said, Mr. Matott, I love the way you tell stories, and if you ever find your story, your authentic story that comes from your head and your heart, which is what my dad always said, I would love to read that. But until then, I'm going to have to defer you to someone else because I can't take this to anyone. And I actually framed that rejection letter because it was the most polite, nice, you know, complimentary rejection I've ever had. And I framed it and put it on my desk, and I looked at it every time I started to write, you know, and took his advice. And I ended up writing this book called My Garden Visits. And I didn't know it was a book when I was writing it because I had lost my mom when I was in my 20s, and it was just my way of grieving and just kind of expressing myself. You know, my dad used to say, when you feel sick, you throw up. So when you feel heart sick, throw up on a piece of paper. And so I started writing this information.
I love that.
And pretty soon I had this book forming, and my brother-in-law was out working at Paramount Pictures, and he said, what are you working on? I said, I'm writing this. I didn't know it was a book. It was just a journaling thing. And he said, well, send me some. I want to read it. And so I sent it to him, and he said, you finally found your book. This is it. And I said, do you really think so? And anyway, so one story led to another, and then one of the people that worked for me, we were driving to one of my clients, and I was telling him about the book, and he says, oh my gosh, my wife is such an amazing watercolor. She would love to illustrate something like that if it's going to be illustrated. And I said, I've always thought it would be. And, you know, since I've conceived it as a book. And so they came over for dinner, and I gave her 2 chapters to read, and she went into my office and closed the door, and, you know, we're sitting around the dinner table, and she came out and she was crying, and she said, oh my gosh, I can see this book. And so we made an agreement that we would just split whatever we did 50-50, and she went to work and made these beautiful watercolors and designed this gorgeous little book. And there was like 115 pages. And I didn't want to go through the whole process of being turned down by agents, so I self-published it, and I had no idea what to do, so I self-published 5,000 copies, unknown author, nobody knows who I am, and but I was a sales guy for a big telecommunications company, so I knew how to, engage people and get them interested, and so 3 weeks later, 4,700 copies were gone, and the tattered cover was calling me and saying, "How many of your friends have you sent down here? We've already sold 300 books." And because their first order, they were going to order 4, and I convinced them to order 50 so that I could tell everybody else that the tattered cover had ordered 50. And so then I went back to that agent, and because I got a call from HarperCollins San Francisco division with what they call a floor offer for the book. They wanted to republish it. And so I asked her, "What would you do if you were me?" She goes, "I would get an agent because I think this is going to be a big book." And so I left a message on the machine and told him, "I've got a floor offer of X amount for this book, and I published 5,000 copies, 4,700 are gone, and I've got another order for 200. So I need help. I need to know what to do with this book." So long story short, he called me 3 copies. Give me an exclusive. Don't talk to any other agents while I'm reading it. Just give me that. And I said, who would I talk to? But so 2 weeks later, I was in New York, and he took me to 12 publishers. And 2 weeks after that, we had a 2-day auction, and Random House got the book and republished it and bought out the sequel. And then the rest was history. I quit my job, and that was in 1996. So I've been a full-time author, speaker ever since. So it's possible if anybody can do it.
It is. So you've gone down both paths, the self-published path and the being with the big boys path. And and I think what my history with you is you've actually done both of them at the same time at times with different books. Is that correct?
Right. Yes, that is correct. I'm doing that right now.
You're doing it right now, because I think authors want to hear about that. I have a lot of people who will come to me saying, they really want to publish with New York. And so I always refer, okay, that's plan A. And what is your plan B? What if New York doesn't pick it up? What's your plan B? And they sometimes they don't want to think about that. And I said, you need to think about that. Because not everyone gets picked up, and the odds are not high. So, and I think one of the things that your plus was, you're incredibly creative. You're a wonderful storyteller. So the story's there, but you also know how to sell, and you know how to do the marketing. And of course, that's a critical ingredient with anyone today in the year 2021. If they're going to try to sell to New York, they have got to have a marketing chutzpah and the pushing forward. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. People engage me all the time like they do you about, a manuscript they've written. And, the first thing I say, and generally I can see the discouragement on their faces, but I say, the bottom line is this: if you have not rewritten this manuscript at least 15 times, don't even bother to submit it to anyone. And, because, the bottom line is people like this agent that I met with, he lived in Connecticut, and I was in his office, and he had a stack of papers, probably 3 feet high, lining his entire office, which was a large office. And I asked him, what are all those manuscripts? He says, that's 2 weeks of submissions from people. And I said, how do you ever select authors to represent? He said, well, I have 3 readers. They read the first 5 pages. If it hooks them, they put it into the maybe pile. If they send that to the next reader and that hooks them, it goes into the next maybe pile. And, generally, 1,000 manuscripts that I get a month, I probably have 3 that I would even contact anybody on. And I said, what, and so we had a lot of time. I was there for 3 days, and I said, so what is one of the biggest criteria that prevents you from representing someone? And he says, I can always tell when people aren't willing to put the work in. They haven't edited. And he says, frankly, a couple of the things that you submitted to me, I just went back and read one of them, and I don't think you ever rewrote that. And I, guilty as charged, I wrote it twice. And he said, yeah, that probably should have been 20 before you ever submitted it to me, because I don't have time to wade through editorial problems. And, little things like using the wrong year, and, and I think that's so anyway, so going back to, people that address this, and they'll ask me, so what should I do with my manuscript? Okay, so now you've rewritten it 20 times. You're probably ready to show it to someone. Now let me ask you a question. You're meeting me here. I'm at a farmer's market hawking my books. And so could you do this? Could you be on the other side of the table pushing your book in people's hands? Oh, no way. I said, then don't self-publish, because no one's going to do that for you. I've had two catastrophic events in my self-publishing world with distributors, because you think a distributor is nirvana. They're going to get you all over the world and stuff. They depend on you to push it and to sell it. They don't do that for you. They just warehouse the books and take a percentage. And so, I mean, that can be a real trap for people if they've got a lot of money invested in their book. So if you can't sell, and if you're not willing to do the hard work to make the book sellable, what I always tell people is your book should be a book that could sit on the shelf next to a New York Times bestseller, have a wonderful cover copy, great illustrations, have that appeal that makes somebody walk up and pick that book up off the shelf. And people will say, oh, I don't know, I don't want to put a jacket on it because that's another 10 cents a book. And I'm like, come on, you are tripping over pennies. Because if you don't put it on there, it's not going to look like the books that people are used to. And I guess one of the things, if somebody's self-publishing, and I love self-publishing because you have a complete handle on what happens to that book, whether it's good or bad. And but I'll have people say, okay, so here's the thing, I've got a budget and I'm only going to be able to do 200 copies. And my question to them is, was it professionally edited? Well, my husband read it. No. Is your husband a professional editor? Well, no, but he took a lot of English in college. When did he graduate? 20 years ago. That's not an editor. Spend the money on someone who can actually do copy editing and give you, content editing. Because, there's Random House has, 250 people, but that's all they do to make those books shine. Well, I can't do that. It's going to cost me $100. If you spend that $200 on it, you're not going to have a book that publishes.
All right. I want you to hold on this right now because we're going to take another break and come back to it. You are echoing the conversations I go through every day. And what I like about the independent publishing mode is there is control, total control, input, but you have to have the time, energy, and yes, the money to invest in it to make it shine and compare with New York. We'll be right back.
This is your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. With your host, Dr. Judith Briles. And we'll be right back with more great information right after these.
Discover the power of you and your book at the Judith Briles Unplugged events. Each summer, Judith Briles Book Marketing Unplugged unfolds over 3 intensive days working with just Judith. You get publishing strategies, author and book platforms, book marketing panache and pizzazz, and authoring tools to take you and your book to rock star success. In the fall and winter, Judith Briles Speaking Unplugged includes Judith as your coach and mentor during 2 powerful days. You will learn how to structure a speech, how to create openings and closings, how to find gigs that pay you and sell your books, and you will get one-on-one coaching. Go to thebookshepherd.com and click on the Events tab to learn how to participate at the next Unplugged Workshop event.
Congratulations on getting your book published. The effort you put into your work is truly commendable. But what's next? What will happen to all the knowledge you have worked so hard to acquire to produce your book? Here at TogiNet Radio, we can provide you a platform to keep your knowledge working for you through the power of podcast. The subjects our podcasts cover are as varied as the grains of sand on a beach. From life coaching to military resources to business success, even to the paranormal. We have a place for everyone. To get started on your next step, call Scott at 903-787-5880 or email him at scott@ TogiNetRadio.com. That's SCOTT at TogiNetradio.com.
Welcome back to your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. Coming up, you'll hear more about statistics, scenarios, and strategies on what to do now to get you published. So let's get back to the show. And here again is your host, Dr. Judith Briles.
With me is Jason Matott. He has written for kids. He has specialized in that kids market. He's done chapter books, picture books. And Jason, before we continue on, why don't you just share a little bit about some of the books that seem the kids resonate when you're with them?
Okay. And Judith, you're doing the most common thing with my name. You called me Jason twice, and I'm Justin.
I said Jason. Justin.
Yeah. Everyone does. I have a very funny story. I'll tell very quickly about that. I was at a big Cal conference up in Keystone, where it's a Colorado Association of Librarians, and I was the keynote for the lunch. And the lady that was going to introduce me came up to me like 2 minutes before I was getting up there, and she said, "You need to tell me some things about you." And I said, "You know what? Just make anything up, and I'll live up to it." And she said, "Okay." I said, "Okay." So she gets up there to the microphone, and most of these librarians have had me in their schools. They know me. She gets up and she says, "I have never been more honored to introduce somebody because this is a very, very personal friend of mine. We've known each other for many, many years, and we've gone through many things together. And, I just feel like, I know this guy so well. So it's just so exciting to be able to, and that's the first time I ever met her. And so I'm so excited to introduce him to you. All this superfluous stuff that she was reading off this script. And then she said, "So ladies and gentlemen, it is my absolute honor to introduce you to Jason Matott." And I looked at her, I was like, "Whoa." Right, and so I got up there to the microphone. I said, "Ladies and gentlemen, here's the thing. Betsy and I have known each other for so long. She's the only one in the world that knows my secret pen name, and now you all know it. So Jason Matott, if you see a book under Jason Matott, that's me. It's been uncovered, but all of you know me as Justin Matott." And she looked at me and she turned so red. And she came up and apologized later. I said, "No, that was actually really funny." And everybody thought it was funny. And I think I covered pretty well. I think people really think I have a pen name now. So I'm going to have to start writing under Jason Matott. Anyway.
Well, maybe you can do romance novels or something with a twist.
Get fun on the cover.
Yeah, for romance novels for the teen set. There you go, Justin. You can really roll it. All right, so we were talking about some kind. I think maybe it's especially newbie authors can become really delusional in what they think their books are, where they can go, how many will sell. I know I have told them, how many books do you think sell 1 million copies every year? And they come through the list. I said, "Who do you think sold 1 million copies?" And okay, Obama did last year. Right, Obama did last year. Who else sold 1 million copies? 2 of the million. There was only 5 that sold 1 million copies last year. 2 of them were for kiddos. One was for how to teach your kids how to write. Did you know that, Justin?
I didn't know that.
Okay, so one was because of COVID. Because of COVID, they're stuck at home. So, but they have this illusion that they're going to be a 1 million book seller. Now, you've sold over 1 million books, and that the kids, when you show up, and maybe you should talk about your strategy of how you sell books in schools. Maybe you should share some of those tips and doing that. But that you've sold well over 1 million books. And have you ever looked at how many have come from publishers versus your back of the room, you're from the car, you're from your website sales?
I just had to do a quick estimate. And the thing is, I have sold over 1 million books. It's over the course of 23 years. So that's a long time. And that's, I think I'm a little over 50 books now in print. But, I think the thing is find a creative way. Like for me, when I went in, I Griselda to Random House because I thought it was going to be a slam dunk because they had just signed me to a really great deal. And they said, well, we'll defer this to our children's division. And when they did, they came back and they said, we love the story. We want to use a different illustrator. And I said, no, we're not going to use a different illustrator. This guy, I've promised him that he's going to illustrate these books. And they said, well, that's not up to you. And I said, I think it is. And then they offered me a fairly low amount of money for it. And then they would have complete, leverage and ability to do anything they wanted with it, including taking out, this awesome illustration. And so I just said, no, I'm not going to do that. And, that book is, probably 250,000 in print. That's children's book, 98. But the thing is that only sold because I loaded up my vehicle because I self-published that book. And my first printing on Old Lady Griselda was 10,000 because I was getting a good name out there in the adult market. And but what I would do is I would just I'd make myself, like I always did in the corporate world, I would make myself a quota, and I have to sell 1,000 books a month to be able to, justify this being my full-time occupation. And that meant that, John Woods and I literally one day we were down on a street in downtown Denver with a stack of Old Lady Griselda, and he was drawing in them, and I was engaging people saying, if you're willing to buy this, I'll put whoever's your kid's name, write a 4-line poem for him, and he'll draw it for you. And we sold like 4 cases of books in a lunchtime. And so that's why I do farmers markets every season. I love doing that because I get to engage my actual readers. And my favorite thing is when a mom or a grandma will bring these kids up, and like one kid is really enthusiastic. Oh, you came to our school. You're so funny, or you're so weird, or whatever they say. And then, the reluctant brother or the reluctant sister who's standing, over on the side. And I say, don't you want to look at my books? I don't like to read. Why don't you like to read? Because it's boring. Well, why is it boring? It just is. My teacher makes me read books I don't want to read. I said, well, what kind of books do you like to read? So when they tell me, I'll say, okay, I don't have anything like that, but try this guy, this or this lady. These books are so awesome. But if I do have something that I think is going to entice them, like I had this one girl, she was in 5th grade, and she was there with her brother, and they were twins, and her brother was so excited to meet me, and because I'd been to their school, and she was very nice, but she said, I don't like reading at all. And I said, why not? And she said, well, I struggle with reading. I said, what's your struggle? And she said, well, they've diagnosed me as dyslexic. I said, oh my gosh, I have 3 books that I designed for children with dyslexia because one of my brothers is very dyslexic. I'll tell you what, if you don't like reading, I don't want your mom to buy this book, but I do want you to take this book home, come back and see me next weekend and tell me what you thought about it. Are you serious? And I said, yeah, I do. I am serious. So I gave her all 3 books, and I packed her off with her brother who got the whole series of Gabe's books. And they came back the next weekend, and Mom said, okay, she wants more of these books. She had so much fun reading them. She took them to summer camp with her, and she was actually reading them to a friend in their tent. And since then, that was like 6 years ago, every summer since in Highlands Ranch where I live at the farmer's market, she'll come back to see me. And this last time I saw her, she said, well, I've kind of outgrown your books now. I said, well, you really haven't, because I have a series coming out for high schoolers. And but, I just think there's an engagement of the individual. The best boss I ever had used to say, you never sell to a corporation, you always sell to a person. Think somebody just like you. They have their likes, their dislikes, and don't try to sell them something they don't need. Try to sell them something that they'll really want, because then they'll always come back to you. And I think, like a lot of people have a distaste in their mouth about selling books. Why
yes,
would you not?
Do.
You're just selling ideas. You're selling ideas.
They do. They do. It's for us nonfiction. I don't have the creative genius you have for these stories that you come up with, but I solve problems and pain with the nonfiction things I write about, and it's still, you have to still engage them, storytelling, bring them along, and you have to be a really good listener so you can pick stuff up. I think that's always been essential. So I'm going to come back, Justin. I have to come back to questions. So when you've kind of crunched your numbers, like Old Lady Griselda, 250,000 books, that's a wowza. So what would you say? Is it an even split between what you've done with New York houses and what you've done on your own, or is it lopsided?
I think at this point, this many years later, I've probably sold 60% of the books that have sold are books that I have published myself. One of the illustrators, Mark Ludy, who does the Dream books, he also co-publishes those books. So he got them into Books Are Fun, which is part of Reader's Digest division.
Oh, Books Are Fun are great, yeah.
Yeah, and that's how those both went over 250,000 in sales, because they went all over Canada and any English-speaking country. And they're actually produced in Spain as well, so they're in Spanish. And
Wow.
but, I think, that's one thing, Mark Ludy as an illustrator is a real engager. And, he is a hustler. I've never seen an illustrator that hustles the way he does. And, I think, Judith, one of the things that goes to the creative person is quite often authors, illustrators, designers, people that I meet in this business are real introverts. And so it's very difficult for them to engage people. They expose themselves to stories, to illustrations, and they don't want to get up and talk in the microphone. It terrifies them. And they shouldn't, because, I've seen a few authors that did the school gig because they got paid, but they shouldn't have done it because they disillusion more kids with the boring storytelling. We need to stay in our strengths. We need to really focus on our strengths and not try to be somebody we're not. And, I'm such an extrovert that when I get a microphone in my hand, I actually have to have, sometimes when I'm in an assembly, which is, schools are very regulated on the time. And so I get like 45 minutes for the assembly, 15 minutes for questions. And, at an hour 5, I've got the principal standing there tapping her watch. And I'm like, okay, I got to pull the plug here.
Oh.
But
I've seen you on the platform. I know what you're like. And it's just this huge amount of energy that blows out. And when I've seen kids, I can see them starting to creep forward. Okay, we can get closer to him. We'll get closer to him. We're going to have fun. This is party time. Justin's here, right?
Right.
It is. All right. So with us is Justin Matott. He has got a gazillion books. And Justin, my deal is I've sold 1 billion books too. The 37 books, 95% are on my own. 95%. Yeah. And I've had 18 of those suckers with New York. So there you go. All right. We're going to be right back. It's AuthorU-Your Guide to Book Publishing. We're talking about creativity and being successful with it.
This is your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. With your host, Dr. Judith Briles. And we'll be right back with more great information right after these.
Are you confused about publishing options? Do you know which printing option is best for your book? Does your stomach flip when you think about selling books? Or do you feel overwhelmed with what to do about book marketing and publicity? Get the answers and much more. Get them and from someone who knows publishing inside and out from both the traditional and independent sides, how to make a successful book. You can't do it alone without paying the price. You can spend your money creating a book that turns out to be so-so, or you can create a book that looks and feels classy, builds your brand and platform, and is a success, a bestseller. It is your choice. You choose. If you want author and publishing success, you want Judith Briles as your book coach. Sign up for her weekly blogs and e-zine at thebookshepherd.com. The book shepherding concept is simple. The publishing world is changing, and so must you. You need an experienced shepherd and guide to collaborate with you as you create, strategize, develop, publish, and achieve your publishing goals. Publishing is riddled with obstacles, sometimes nightmares for the author. You do not need more problems. You want solutions. Dr. Judith Briles will shepherd you through the maze and chaos. At times, she has had to step in and rescue a book A book that has been sabotaged by a publisher, by a publishing service provider, and sometimes even by the author. If you want author and book success, connect with her today at thebookshepherd.com.
Welcome back to your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. If you want to write and publish a book, if you want to be successful as an author, your guide to book publishing, everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask, is for you. Stay tuned and you'll hear about statistics, scenarios, and strategies on what to do now to get you published. So let's get back to the show. And here again is your host, Dr. Judith Briles.
With me is Justin Matott, and we're really talking about creativity. He is an author of so many books designed for kids of a variety of ages. There's chapter books, there are picture books, they are beautiful. I would just tell all of you, go to your favorite bookstore and just say whatever you have of Justin's, and it's Matott, double T at the end. Just get it. So use it as a learning guide to how to work a book, how to lay it out, how to let the story roll out. All of you who are writing children's books, this is really a guide, a coach, a virtual mentor that you can jump on board with. Justin, you have to tell the story. We were just talking promo on, he had this great idea and he was stopped by the publisher because it wasn't their idea. And it made me laugh out loud because that's the way people think. So Justin, share that very quickly. And then let's jump into opportunities via the internet, which probably you should avoid, as well as some common mistakes we want you to stay away from.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'll tell all your listeners that I am moving my warehouse. I have somewhere in the neighborhood of 75,000 books in my warehouse right now, and we're going to move it. So I'm trying not to move it to the new warehouse. So I'm going to be changing up on my website, which is justinmatott.com, and there's going to be a minimum of 25% off of every book, and it can go as high as 50% off, and there's points, and there's going to be prizes and all kinds of stuff, because we're really trying to eliminate having to have somebody come and move all these books. So that's going to happen within the next couple of weeks, and that's going to go through, I think, April or May. So, okay, so we were talking about the little thing that happened with Random House. I had my first book with them came out, and they their first printing of it was 125,000, which is extraordinary for an unknown author. But they really believed in it because they saw me sell 4,700 copies out of the back of my vehicle, and so they brought out 125,000 copies of it, and then they went to a second printing, and so the book was doing very, very well. They didn't really know how to categorize it, and that was one of the biggest problems they had with the book. They kept putting it in the wrong place in bookstores, but people kept finding it. And so I decided I was going to get on a national television show. And so I was talking to the promotions rep out in California and asked what was their goal, what did they see getting on. And they said, well, we're working on it, but these things take time. And my brother-in-law worked at Paramount Pictures, and so I went out to stay with him for a couple of weeks, and I was on the Paramount lot with him, and he said, so tell me about the book. So I was telling him about what was going on with the book and how Random House had brought it back out in a nice, beautiful hardcover. And he said, so what's your next plan? I said, well, I've got to get a national show to carry it so that, it's got the promotion to go into all the bookstores. And I said, do you have anybody here at Paramount that would be like that? And he said, well, Lisa Gibbons is a great afternoon talk show host, and she's probably somebody that could really push the book. And so I never tell short stories. I always say long story short, but it's not. So I went in, and he said, no, you can't go in there. I'll get fired. And I said, no, I'm not going to ever use your name. And, if I get kicked off the lot, they don't know how I got on the lot. And I tell every author this, no matter where you go, at least you, because you never know who you're going to meet. I met Bing Crosby because my brother not Bing Crosby. I met Bill Cosby, which was before all of the scandal, because my brother knew him, and he was on the way to Chicago to be on the Oprah show. So I gave him 3 copies of Old Lady Griselda. Nothing ever came of it, but Bill liked it. So always have 3 copies of your book. So I walked into the Lisa Gibbons office, and the receptionist stopped me, and she said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, I want to talk to Lisa Gibbons." She goes, "Do you have an appointment?" I said, "No, I just am vacationing from Colorado." And she goes, "That's not how this works." And I said, "Well, Lisa seems like a really engaging person. I'd just like to meet her." And so she said, "Well, sir, I can't let you meet her. She's going to be taping in an hour, and she's busy right now." And I said, "Okay, could I leave something for her?" And so anyway, I had 3 copies, and I said, "By the way, what's your name?" And she told me her name, and so I signed it to her, and I said, "I hope you enjoy this book. It's my new one, and I just, would really love you to read it, and hope you enjoy it." And so then all of a sudden, Lisa Gibbons came around, and she said, "What is this all about?" And I said, "Oh my gosh, I do get to meet you." I said, "Okay, well, I'm just here really quickly. I won't take any of your time. Here's a book. I wrote it, and I just wanted you to have this book, and that's all. Just wanted to see if there's something that you'd like." So about a month later, Lisa Gibbons called me personally and said, "Hey, Justin, I was on my way to a family vacation. I took your book with me. I read it twice on the beach. I love the book. I want you on my show." So I called. I was so excited to call the promotions people at Random House and tell them what happened, and they chewed me out. Said, "You can't do that. What if we would have gotten you on Oprah instead?" A bird in the hand here. So they got mad at me, and I said, "Well, then you probably don't want to know the next step. I'm going to buy an RV and travel all over the country, and I'm going to order about 10,000 copies of your book, and I'm going to have them with me, and I'm going to go from bookstore to bookstore." "Nope, you can't do that. We forbid you to do that. We'll have to cancel your contract if you do something like that." I'm like, "You don't want me to sell 10,000 copies of this book that way?" So anyway, that was when I really kind of got disenfranchised with the big, you have to be with New York, because nobody tells me I can't get an RV and travel with my books. And, I've been to like 30 states promoting my books on my own. And, Judith, you know this better than anyone. That sells a lot of books.
Mm-hmm.
And it also, those people, like, you go to New Jersey bookstore, they don't know who I am. You go anywhere in Colorado, they know. You go anywhere in this region, they know, because this is the region I live in and go to schools in. And, but, it's just, how small do you want your world to stay? So anyway, I think, self-publishing is not for the faint of heart, but it's for people who really can engage, handshake, get people engaged with their projects. So if you have that ability, I absolutely encourage you to publish a book, but make sure you do all the things to make it the best book it can be.
That would be an amen. Okay, so what are some of the common mistakes that we want them to? One is you can't hide. You got to come out, and you have to be. Well, I always say this, Justin, that you've got to evolve from being the CWO, the Chief Writing Officer, to the CMO, the Chief Marketing Officer. That is your job.
Absolutely. And doubt that the book is going to be in your garage or your basement or your bedroom. And most of the people that I meet that have self-published, they still have just an enormous amount of books after publication. After 3 years, they still have, I had one guy tell me, "Our barn is full of our kids' books because he just doesn't know how to sell them." Well, then why do you keep printing them? But, and so the thing is, an author who can't do that, then engage someone who can, that believes strongly in what it is that your book is about, and get them out in front of you. I mean, that's why I was a marketing corporate guy, because that's what I got my background in. And so that's why, telecommunications companies hired me, because that was my expertise. But a technical person couldn't have done that, and I couldn't have done the technical job. So stay in your strengths, or find someone who has those strengths. So I think, one of the things that's very interesting with the internet now, because the internet is the tail that's wagging the dog as far as promotion. And, a lot of people think, if I'm on a website, my book's going to be big. That's not necessarily true. But one of the things, I was just down in Austin, Texas, meeting with my new agent. And what she said to me was, what we really need to do, because she's trying to get my Gabe series into Hollywood and some other things. And she said, what we really need to do is we need to up your social media game, because right now it's pretty weak. And she's right. And because what publishers and people in that industry are looking at right now is what kind of a following do you have? How many likes are you getting? And I mean, there's an agent within the agency that I'm with who has actually found 5 authors, in quotes, on Instagram. They have a great platform. They have 1 million followers. They have an idea for a book, but they don't really know how to write a book. So they marry them with somebody who can ghostwrite the book with them. And, those books, are probably going to be bestsellers because they've got 1 million people that they can tell, my book is coming out in 2 weeks, order it now. And if 3% of those people act on it, that's a really nice selling book for the first laydown. So I think, and I'm trying really hard. I'm engaging people right now in the social media world. I don't know what to do because I really don't. I'm not a millennial. I don't understand that headset. And and sometimes, I'll put something on that I think is super funny. Well, that doesn't sell anything. It just makes people laugh. So I think, there again, it's like having a good editor. Have somebody who really understands the social media world and figure out how to build a platform because that, my agent must have said 25 times platform in her conversation with me. Mm-hmm. They want a platform. And, so I said, well, I have a pretty good anti-bullying platform. And she said, the problem is there's so much noise in that sector. There's so many people that are doing anti-bullying now. Now, I do it uniquely, but that doesn't mean, that people are going to mm-hmm. jump on that bandwagon. So what is the platform? My platform is always humor. And, if you make somebody laugh, everybody likes to laugh. So that's an engaging thing to do. But so I think, what I recommend to anyone who's got a book or a book that's, being born is what truly is your heart behind it? Why did you write it? Who should read it? And I always tell people when you envision your book, don't just envision it in your imagination. Actually go down to the Tattered Cover, which is my favorite bookstore, and go into the section where your book will be. Go categorically, by author, however they, put those books on the shelves, and imagine your book between two books, because that will help you when you pitch it. When you say, my book is going to appeal to people who enjoy this author or this style of work, because that makes you, stand out.
All right. And with that said, we are out of time. Justin Matott, my offer to you is I am really good on social media, and I will show you how to build that. That's my offer to you. All right. I'm good. All right, everyone. Have a great week. Happy writing, happy publishing. And remember, there's always tips and ahas on our shows. Go to our website at Book Publishing Podcast. There's over 300 shows to download. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for being a part of Your Guide to Book Publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. With your host, Dr. Judith Briles.